It was 1980, the summer after my sophomore year at UC Davis. I was in my Dodge Colt hatchback, making the 8-hour drive from school back home to Los Angeles. I had spent that spring coming out to all of my closest friends in my fraternity, and I had just found a gay roommate for the coming school year through the campus gay student union. His name was Scott. He was transferring from Irvine up to Davis, and we had made arrangements to meet up in Laguna Beach, about 2 hours south of where my parents lived in Los Angeles. My parents' house was undergoing remodeling that summer, and they were staying with my grandparents a few blocks away, so I stayed there too. On the night before I was to drive down to Laguna Beach to spend the day with Scott and his boyfriend Eddie, I went out to nearby West Hollywood, as I had several times before, to mingle with my own kind. Now, this was before Scruff and Grindr, before the internet, when the only way to meet other gay men was to go out and meet them. I was 19. I looked like I was 15, and still, I never got carded at the Motherlode Bar on Santa Monica Boulevard. I drank my mineral water with lime, and I played pinball. After a while, a man joined me at the machine. His name was Matt, about 23, sandy blonde hair, hazel green eyes, beefy muscular build, just the kind of guy that fueled my teenage surfer dude fantasies. We played pinball and talked over the bells and buzzers, and then sometime after midnight, he leaned over, kissed me, and said in his soft, sweet voice, "Let's get out of here." It was an unusually chilly night for July in Los Angeles. We couldn't go back to Matt's place. We tried making out in my car, but there just wasn't enough room to move around. We went to a nearby park, hoping to find someplace that might be out of sight. We sat on the cold, gravelly concrete bench of a baseball dugout in the park and explored each other's bodies through clothing far too thin for the weather. My teeth were chattering. We had to go someplace else. I then had the thought that we could go to my parents' house. At least there we would find some warmth and privacy. It was just a few minutes' drive from the park to my childhood home. The house was dark, but the street lamp outside illuminated the living room through the windows with a soft glow. Translucent plastic sheeting covered the doorways, and old bed sheets covered the furniture to protect them from all the construction dust. We dragged a mattress to the middle of the living room floor and took one of the sheets to put on top of the mattress. We kissed some more as we removed our clothes and settled under the sheet on the mattress. We snuggled closely, more from the cold than from sexual desire, which by now was rapidly being overtaken by exhaustion. I'd fooled around with a lot of guys before, but this was the first time I'd actually slept with one. We spooned, Matt behind me, his arm around me, soft skin over substantial muscle. For the first time in hours, I felt warm. For the first time ever with another man, I felt safe. And then I fell asleep. The next thing I knew, I heard keys rattling in the front door. The door opened, and I awakened to harsh yellow rays. I looked up, and there stood my dad. There was a pained look in his spectacled eyes as he took in the sight of his son, naked with a strange man under a sheet on his mattress in his living room. He said nothing. He walked to the kitchen phone. I heard him punch in some numbers. He's over at the house. He's okay. We'll talk later. When I turned back towards Matt, He was almost dressed. I think I'd better be going, was all he said as he tossed me my clothes and left. No goodbye kiss, no goodbye, just gone. I don't remember much of what happened the rest of that day. I spent it in a blur of strong emotions. I vaguely remember the 2-hour drive to Laguna where I spent the day on the beach with Scott and Eddie. I sat on a beach blanket in between them and took turns crying on each of their shoulders. I couldn't shake the feelings of shame and devastation. I had betrayed my father's respect and trust. I was always the compliant straight-A kid who never got into any trouble. Now, all the approval I'd built up over 19 years had come crashing down in a single moment that replayed in an endless loop in my mind all afternoon. Later that night, when I got back to Los Angeles, I sat across from my parents at a table in a coffee shop, and we had the talk, which naturally consisted of my mother doing all the talking. She had 3 things to tell me, which I've since learned is the classic liberal Jewish response to a son coming out as gay. First, Daniel, we love you no matter what, which is always a nice thing to hear. Second, we're concerned about you leading a challenging lifestyle. Now, this is back when being gay was considered a lifestyle before it became a preference and then an orientation. And third, don't tell your grandparents, it would kill them. On the 8-hour drive back to Davis, I had a lot of time to think. I knew that I was loved unconditionally. I knew that I would always confront shame and intolerance because of who and what I was. And I knew that for at least the next year, I would have a roommate who would help me overcome the shame with pride, and who would celebrate with me every little triumph on my journey of coming out. And that journey continues. Thank you.